One.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Objective. And today we're going to be talking about a little bit of a sort of, I don't know what you'd call this. It's not inside baseball. It's sort of, I think, it caters to kind of the inner circle of audience members of this whole kind of this channel and this sort of outer circle. I guess I said inner circle. Anyway, we're going to be reviewing Yaron Brook's recent appearance on the Sam Seder podcast. Sam Seder was the subject of an episode we did a week or two ago, which was my idea, which was the right's worst nightmare. And it was sort of about, I postulated that the right, quote unquote, a lot of them are sort of afraid of Sam Seder, not because they can't counter his arguments, but because they are relying on the idea that the left won't even debate. The left won't even come to the table. The left are all crazy and, social justice warrior lunatics. And someone like Sam Seder is saying, what are you talking about? I'm ready to debate. Well, when are we going to debate? And he's avoided like the plague. In any case, Yaron Brook was on Sam's podcast yesterday, and we are going to talk about that. Here to talk about that is a guy who you know well from television and, of course, from TV talk on the Ayn Rand Center UK. It's actor Mark Pellegrino.
What's up?
Not much. So what'd you think of the debate?
Yeah, I just got done watching it. I actually got embroiled in a massive debate because of a little 2-minute soundbite that I guess Sam's followers put up, basically claiming that Yaron Brook doesn't mind people, being killed in apartment complex crashes. And that was sort of the narrative that they kept trying to paint. And for a while, it was Yaron and I both sort of arguing with these Satanists, for lack of a better word, and they were fairly immovable. But I didn't see the debate until just today. I don't find anything extraordinary about Sam Seder, to be honest with you. It's not like it's not like he's not saying the most cliche things in the world that I think any half well-read objectivist couldn't counter in a second. What is the right so afraid of?
Yeah, it's because the right, people like Steven Crowder and I think kind of Dave Rubin is in the same category. Like their brand includes the idea that the left won't even talk to us, that's how crazy the left has gotten. And they're not wrong to say that, but there are certainly exceptions to that. And someone like Sam Seder, the reason he's remarkable is that he's unremarkable. He's sort of yesteryear's kind of left-leaning Democrat. He's not urging for a gulag to re-educate Trump supporters or anything like that. He really is a mixed economy advocate that wants to sort of trend in the direction of more entitlements and probably more regulations. And he's not out there as part of this kind of big tent of people saying that the left has gone too crazy and that everyone should then switch over to the right. He is evidence against that.
Go ahead. You go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was going to jump into the content of what they discussed, but if you had a thought on that.
I was just going to say, it seems like almost everything he thinks and believes revolves around a sort of essential that human beings are helpless to make their own choices and decisions, or they're so inherently corrupt that the profit motive will taint them so much that they'll only see that and they won't make choices with respect to their impacts on the world around them. And that's sort of that false dichotomy of, when you are acting for your own self-interest, you are automatically in conflict with the community. And I think that's why Yaron did so well against him, because he's able to essentialize Sam's argument and turn it on its head in a way that only objectivists can. And I thought illustrated very well how we've just ceded so much of our moral agency to these bureaucrats, and that creates the type of world that Sam is actually condemning.
Yes, he's great at, like many people like him are great at pointing at problems and saying, look what capitalism brought us, when really it's the regulations, or it's just the lack of individual rights being protected that brought about a lot of these problems. So as I was watching it also this morning, I was watching it in preparation. It got me thinking about how one of the early utilitarians was a capitalist, John Stuart Mill, and he's largely cited as one of the biggest advocates of free markets. Although my understanding is late in his life he ended up turning, which is typical. I would say that's a microcosm. That is an important detail, that he and other utilitarians have become anti-capitalist or more commonly kind of advocates of the mixed economy and setting the groundwork for increased government regulation. So if the standard is utility, that is the highest benefit for the highest number of people, then you become suspicious of selfishness. You become suspicious of the profit motive. And it's that premise, that moral premise, that makes you basically, it distorts your vision, I think. You end up kind of seeing this, we're looking at the same reality, but you end up with kind of a tainted view of things where like every businessman is out to trick you, and only really the government, bureaucrat, the most soulless government bureaucrat you can find is the best. That premise ends up distorting how people really assess the situation around them.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I was amazed at the number of people on my feed who actually don't think that massive portions of their life are their responsibility, including sorting out where you live, how you live, what drugs you take, what you ingest. None of that they consider to be their own responsibility. Or they, even in today's world where access to information, almost anything you want is almost instantaneously accessible, they still don't think that those things are within their control. I can understand it in the 1950s. You know, there's a part of me that gets a regulatory state in a way. If somebody can't have access to information, they can't know where that company was based. They can't know the ingredients that they're putting. They couldn't at the time that they're putting in their foodstuffs or products, but now they can. And now there's even apps available where you can source crowds for information on various products, places to stay. There's community sharing of information. It's like, if the regulatory state is obligatory now in your mind, you're not in the 21st century.
Yeah, definitely. The availability of information definitely is a strike against this idea that the average person is just helpless and needs the government to provide him with, like, you know, eat this, don't eat this, or that the government needs to regulate every medicine for 10 years before it's introduced to the market. Like doctors and patients can't figure out the risks and make an informed decision. Something that struck me is that very early on in the discussion, Sam was making this point how, look, we sometimes disagree about property. So we have the courts or we have the government deciding who's right. And that basically, I think he's alluding to the idea that the government should basically just be full arbiter, that the government basically dictates what is true, because as individually, we often disagree about what's true. And here the government, someone needs to make a decision. So you might as well have the government to do that. But then later on, slavery was brought up as like an example of why capitalism is a tyrannical system. But I mean, the government upheld slavery. So then, like, how can you be anti-slavery if you also want the government to decide what's true and what's moral? There seems to be kind of a contradiction there. There needs to be an objective reality that everyone can access, and this objective reality needs to be the objective rule of law needs to say that every individual has a right to live by his own judgment, and force is not tolerable. Then the court's job, the government's job, is to enforce that principle, to enforce that objective rule of law. And obviously slavery is far off the table in such a scenario.
Well, I think Sam isn't really aware of those contradictions in his thinking, unless it serves whatever his larger purpose is. But what I thought Yaron did that was very good there, that I think was missed by Sam, is when he was trying to push Yaron to acknowledge that government is a source of right. They are the ones who define these parameters for us. Yaron said, no, reality is. And I wish there was a little more pushback in what that meant exactly, because we cede our retaliatory force to an institution that's supposed to be governed by objective law, by due process, right? So that means force is subordinated to reason at all times. And the purpose is to get at objective reality. So yes, we have the court. What's the final arbiter? Reality. And the judges are trying to establish that. They're trying to figure out, in some of these complex cases, what's real, what's true. So in the end, it's always reality that's the arbiter.
Exactly right. And it got me thinking about how it really is deeper philosophical questions that supersede a discussion about economics or politics in general. The nature of man. What's interesting is obviously we're fans of objectivism. If you listen to Leonard Peikoff's lectures on objectivism back in the late 60s, and this was discussed in the study group with James Valiant here at ARC UK for members only. Why do those early discussion or those early lectures back in the late 60s start with the nature of man? That's where it begins, and then kind of works its way out to like, to epistemology and up to politics. It starts with man. Whereas if you read Objectivism, the philosophy of Ayn Rand, the book in the early 90s, it starts at the bottom, starts at metaphysics and works its way up all the way to politics and aesthetics. And I think what Mr. Valiant poses in that discussion group is that back then Peikoff was sort of basing his presentation of objectivism according to kind of how Rand presents it, which was in the form of novels first, like the form of characters. So the nature of man is where you start, like what is man? And you kind of get to see a man, and then you sort of conceptualize, okay, what are this man's epistemology, his metaphysics, what political system is he best suitable for him, etc. So that's kind of, that's how I've been thinking about it. And the nature of man is, in many instances, the best way to start any discussion of philosophy, when the nature of man, of course, quickly raises what is ethics, like what should a man do? And when there's radical disagreement between Yaron Brook and Sam Seder about what is the nature of man, can man be objective? Can the average man, live by his own judgment? When there's radical disagreement about that, there's going to be radical disagreement about ethics. The way they look at the businessman, how they assess the businessman, is going to be radically different. And what type of political system is in order is obviously going to be very different. How a free market would look is going to be imagined very differently by the two of them. Of course, Sam Seder thinks it's going to be nothing but collapsing buildings and poisoning by doctors.
See, but now what we see in the dialogue between the two, and I thought Sam was much more gracious than I thought he would be. But what we see is an unbridgeable divide between two people. And Yaron had already said before he even went on the show that he didn't expect to convert Sam Seder. Now, that's saying a lot, and he's hoping to touch a few people out there who are on the fence, who are attracted to Sam for whatever reason, and by accident they swerve into the truth through Yaron. But that's saying something. That's saying that gap is unbridgeable. What does that mean for us? As a country, I think one of the only countries in the world that started with an individualist ethic and that still has it in our sense of life. What can we do with the nihilists and the radical skeptics that are out there that are utterly immune to any argument that contradicts their mental map, their worldview? What do we do? Divorce?
Good question. Probably not do what they tell you, like don't do what they say, don't abide by the rules that they hurl at you. And beyond that, lead by example. A lot of these social justice lunatics, a lot of them are young, a lot of them are inspired in some way by what they kind of perceive to be a moral direction. They see themselves as the descendants of the abolitionists and the descendants of the civil rights leaders and all of that. I mean, I agree that I hear Yaron making that point that if there is any hope, it's probably with these sort of scientific-minded people like Lex Fridman, like Sam Harris, like Sam Seder, generally left-leaning people, but they have a respect for science and they're not complete leftist lunatics. And I find it interesting in looking at the landscape today, someone like Bill Maher. I mean, can you imagine, just thinking back 10 years ago, can you imagine that someday Bill Maher would be one of the people standing up against the left? Today, he calls out critical race theory as the lunacy that it is. He's opposed to cancel culture and all of that. It's hard to believe that someone like Bill Maher, and there's other examples of this. Probably if Jon Stewart was still on the scene, he'd probably be one of the big, he'd probably be called a conservative today. It really is amazing just how many, of yesterday's kind of leftists are today's centrists. It's scary that that's how far the culture is moving in that direction towards the left. But still, these people are, maybe they represent a hope of people that can be persuaded.
Well, when I was on Dave Rubin's show ages ago now, I don't even know how long ago that was. I made a distinction between the left and liberals, and I patting myself on the back, I think I was ahead of my time, but I think people who formerly occupied places in the left are starting to understand that distinction now and drift away and come back into the fold of liberalism. Now, their notion of liberalism still has that altruistic bent to it, where we're bound to each other by social duties, but they're stepping away from the more extreme versions of that, and I think touching their toes in the water of classical liberalism. So I'm hoping that means there's a renaissance. I hope we have a renaissance in our country.
I hope so too. And you might have influenced Dave Rubin in that interview. I mean, for a while, that was his brand, classical liberal. He was selling shirts that said classical liberal. That was his thing, where we got like this tent of people. They're not quite on board with what the left is doing, and they're not exactly conservative. So what are these people? And I think time has shown largely they're conservatives. At the end of the day, they're going to pick one or the other. They're, selfishness as a virtue it's not something they're willing to get on board with. So basically, what does that leave them? Basically, just become card-carrying Republicans or join the left, which people have done. People have joined the nihilistic left who 5 years ago were what you'd call anti-social justice warriors. They stood up against they stood up against social justice philosophy. And today with the reemergence of BLM, with the sort of way that the country turned out under Trump, quite a handful of vocal people who used to be anti-social justice today are basically shrugging and saying, yeah, you know what? Maybe there's more to social justice than we thought, or it wasn't as big a threat as we thought. These guys turned out to be right. They're saying so. People generally, they've either joined the social justice left or they've become Republicans. And there is kind of this group of people, like, I guess, Bill Maher now is one of them. And Sam Harris maybe is also in this sort of group. They're not quite with either one. They're not going with critical race theory. They're definitely not Republicans. So they're still sort of looking for what's next. And these are wonderful people to engage with if they're open to it, to challenge them philosophically.
Well, I wonder if they will be challenged. I mean, Sam Harris still has made a reputation by a particular point of view, and people that make a reputation tend to hold on to that thing that makes their reputation pretty vigorously. So I can't imagine him being pried away from his premises even by somebody as strong as Yaron Brook, and or becoming an ally with people like us. I think he rejects objectivism.
Yeah, I don't expect Sam Harris to be inspired and change his mind as a 50-some-year-old man, I'm assuming, who has rejected much of what objectivism offers. But like you mentioned earlier, like Yaron says, the point of a debate or an engagement is not to persuade your opponent or your conversation partner. In most cases, it's to reach their audience and to let the audience just be aware that there's another perspective to consider. And that's how the world is probably going to be changed. So for that reason, I was pleased by Yaron's debate discussion with Sam Seder. I thought it was pretty good. Yaron was actually a little bit more combative than I even expected, because Sam was pretty laid back. This is the way I perceived what took place. I know that sounds like subjectivism, but nonetheless.
No, I got that. I got that too. But I think because he went in there thinking that he was going into a hostile environment, so he wanted to be assertive. He didn't want to get walked over by those folks. And that the announcer guy, Matt, did sometimes put his ridiculous 2 cents in, annoying cliche that he was. And I thought Yaron handled him quite well.
Yeah. He did handle it quite well, but like you said, I think he was expecting an ambush, but Maybe he was pleasantly surprised. Sammy, thank you for the 99 pence. Thank you, Marilyn, for the $3. Thank you, Jeff, for the $3 Canadian. Thank you, Marilyn, for the $4. And thank you, Jeff, for the $10 Canadian. He says, quote, for the coming of that day shall I fight, I and my sons and my chosen friends, for the freedom of man, for his rights, for his life, for his honor. That's probably Harry Potter or something. I don't know who said that. I don't know. I'm kidding. Who the hell knows? It sounds like a founding. I don't know. Who is it? Jeff, what is this? Can you please tell us the source? Thank you for all the super chats. So yeah, good debate they had, good discussion. Good to see that there is the presence of people like Sam Seder. And it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens in the upcoming years. I've definitely thought in the aftermath of 2020, I've thought about like, where's the culture heading? I've predicted that, oh yeah, Dylan, our moderator behind the scenes today says it's from Anthem. Thank you for that. And yes, please everyone read Anthem. I clearly need to reread it. But I predicted that political correctness is going to kind of subside a little bit. And I think even just this past year has shown a lot more people are like kind of rolling their eyes at the whole thing after how like literally violent things have gotten and how extreme things have gotten in that pro political correctness. I'm kind of predicting like kind of a 90s type of decade ahead now that we've got the craziness behind us. And I'm curious to see where someone like Bill Maher, where someone like Sam Seder, where these people will end up, because they are going to be in the hot seat sooner or later. They're going to be roasted by the nihilistic left. They're going to, I mean, they have been. Certainly Bill Maher has been. They've tried to cancel him and get him off TV and stuff like that. And it's probably going to get worse if these social justice lunatics don't relax. So I'll be curious to see if at some point this sort of reluctant leftists, I guess you'd call them, these liberals, I guess you'd call them, be curious to see how they continue to engage with objectivists now that objectivists are taking such a firm step into the internet in the last in recent years.
Speaking of, I think I'm having a debate with Zuby pretty soon. We're thinking about the 16th. I'll get the times and everything and make sure I announce it. It'll be on abortion.
Nice. Good topic. Now, Zuby is a bodybuilder. He broke some kind of record for female bodybuilding, and that was kind of the hook. That was the joke, I guess, the gimmick. He just announced that he's female. He easily lifted something that no woman had ever lifted, and I think it worked.
He broke the woman's deadlifting record.
Yeah. And he's become quite the prominent commentator. He's a rapper. He does rap. And hey, it's clean. It's positive. Who says hip hop needs to be negative, guys? Check out Zuby's music and check out his upcoming debate with Mark Pellegrino. Also, Phil with 50 pounds. 50 pounds. 50 pounds. That's more than $50. He says, thanks, guys. I'll 500 sponsor a critique of YouTube. Jonathan Sumption, COVID-19, and the Constitution. What say you guys, Anikos? I understood some of that. I don't really know what he's saying. He goes, I'll 500 sponsor a critique of YouTube, Jonathan Sumption, COVID-19, and the Constitution. Is that a name of a video you want somebody to review here? Let's get Phil. Do you know how to get in touch with Razi Ginsburg? I'm sure he'd love to discuss any proposal you have. And if you don't know how to, please indicate so, and we'll try to get you in touch with him. Sound good? Anyway, coming up tomorrow, we've got TV Talk with Mark Pellegrino, Jack Schumann, and Jennifer
Buani.
They're going to be comparing Atlas Shrugged with another TV show. This time it's Breaking Bad. Probably a lot of you have seen that series in its entirety, so no reason to miss this. Show up, be there, or be square. I'm looking forward. It's an enjoyable show, guys. I mean, this is the type of show that, like, if it was on Showtime with better, with higher definition cameras, it would be like, it would be considered one of the most important series, behind the scenes these are like TV people. These are people in the industry talking about TV. And we are privileged to have it here on ARC UK. So I'm enjoying it so far. Marialine with $2 says Jonathan Sumption is the best. I still don't know who that is, but again, if Phil has a proposal for Razi, please get a hold of him. And thank you for the super chat. All right, so yeah, that's coming up tomorrow on ARC UK TV Talk with Mark Pellegrino and his co-hostesses. Breaking Bad versus Atlas Shrugged. Looking forward to that, guys. This is real stuff. These people are in the TV business. All right, this is real stuff. Jumping over to Clubhouse next. And if you haven't seen the Yaron Brook versus Sam Seder debate, go check it out. See you guys on Clubhouse momentarily. Phil says, no, I don't know how to get in touch with him. I don't know. Literally, what am I supposed to do right now? Like, Phil, get in touch with me. I don't know. Are you on Clubhouse? Jesus Christ. I'm like standing here trying to end the show. Phil wants to talk business, wants to talk shop. Is there like an email address, Dylan, we can give this guy? I don't know what to do. Phil, get in touch with me and or Razi and or join us on Clubhouse momentarily. Dylan says looking. Oh, better yet, Phil, go to Ayn Rand Center UK's Twitter or website and hit the contact tab or the message tab or tweet at Ayn Rand Center UK and Razi will see you. Okay, also link posted in the chat room. Sorry to filibuster, and we are going to be on Clubhouse momentarily. Thank you, Mark, for sitting through that outro and for the wonderful discussion.
Thank you, man.
See you guys on Clubhouse. Goodbye.